Millions of student loan borrowers now turning their eyes to the Supreme Court as it gears up to hear arguments over President Joe Biden's student debt relief plan. For more on what the Supreme Court justices are likely examining, let's get to Yahoo Finance contributor Kevin Cirilli. Happy Monday, Kevin. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Julie. Look, I mean, there's a couple of narratives that we've got to be on the lookout for Tuesday's Supreme Court case as it relates to student debt. Remember that there was a district judge a couple of months ago that struck down and dismissed the lawsuit that came before them as it relates to whether or not President Biden's student loan forgiveness program was okay and was by the book. So the Supreme Court actually, one path that they could take, which is many people are saying right now is unlikely, but they could dismiss this. And if that happens, then President Biden's student loans program and forgiveness program stays in place. Now, this is where it gets a little more tricky. Let's say that they continue this case. We would anticipate a ruling sometime at the end of the Supreme Court's term, sometime in July or August this summer, where they would rule on this. Remember, 6 Republican-led states have argued that this program, $400 billion worth of student loan forgiveness, is illegal. And so if that happens, then this is what I would anticipate, that the Biden administration would have another go at it. And what they would essentially try to do as they inch forward into 2024 is to make student loan forgiveness a key issue, a political issue for voters to decide on. Either way, the student debt forgiveness program, which impacts, again, $400 billion worth of folks who earn fewer than $125,000 annually, this issue is not going away, and it has become a very polarized issue, but it kickstarts on Tuesday before the Supreme Court.
Kevin, while we have you, we got to discuss some of the sanctions and how they might be likely to escalate in response to Russia receiving chips and other support from China in some of the geopolitical news that we're following.
Well, it's a great question because last week we talked about how China and Xi Jinping are cozying up to Russia and to Vladimir Putin, and they've scheduled this meeting, face-to-face meeting, in the coming weeks and the coming months. Now, they've also put out something like a 12-step plan, which has been collectively met with an eye roll and a shrug here in Washington, D.C., from both Republicans and Democrats as it relates to China somehow trying to play peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine, specifically when China has not followed NATO, followed strategic partners, followed the United States, followed Ukraine in issuing sanctions and issuing export controls against Russia to get them to stop. The West and democracies believe that the best way to get Russia to stop their war with Ukraine is to put economic pressure on them. China refuses to follow along with that. And now there's new reporting. And Jake Sullivan was out on CNN with Dana Bash over the weekend saying this, the president's national security advisor, that China has actually been helping Russia skirt some of the export controls and sanctions that have been put in place by the West, or even facilitating Russia to get chips. And where are these chips going through? Turkey. And so that's raised new questions specifically about how China sees this relationship with Russia in the long term. And again, Jake Sullivan saying that should China continue down this path, that they're going to face geopolitical risk of their own from an economic standpoint. The Biden administration has continued with the U.S. policy of some of the previous administration's export controls and sanctions levied against China. And candidly, from the comments over the weekend, it's looking unlikely that they will be lifted anytime soon.
Right. Yes, that's definitely something we've been hearing as well. Thing 3 for you, Kevin, this morning. There's been a lot of talk about whether President Biden is going to run again for president in 2024. He says he's gonna, but maybe there's a little bit of wavering of that resolve. I don't know. Tell me what the word is in Washington.
Well, look, I mean, Marianne Williamson, who's a New York Times bestselling author, she ran for president back in 2016. She's moving forward with running. This is a long shot candidacy for sure. But what it does, Julie, quite frankly, is it opens the door for other Democrats who could pose a challenge to President Biden in a primary to say, hey, you know what, if Marianne's already running, then why not me? And so that's when it gets interesting, when you have conversations with people who are allies of Senator Joe Manchin, a centrist from West Virginia, who candidly has not ruled out running as some type of unity ticket with like a Liz Cheney or someone more progressive like Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. So he's going to have a definitive declarative statement on whether or not he is going to run. And it seems like we're moving toward that inflection point relatively soon. But he's faced some low approval ratings, and whether or not he can rally progressives to turn out to vote for him in what's looking, in contrast, to be a crowded Republican field remains to be seen.
Yes, we'll keep in touch with you as you stay on top of that. Thanks so much, Kevin Cirilli. Appreciate it.